And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our show today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And please welcome Susana Porras. So wonderful to have you. Susana, you are a community organizer in Pasadena. You're a writer and author, and you're here to talk about your book, To Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago. Gosh, thanks so much for being here because your story is quite beautiful. And this book is a book of poetry from your 500-mile journey that you did with your 73-year-old father.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the Camino. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really looking forward to sharing my story with you.
Yeah, your poetry is beautiful, I have to tell you. But I have to ask first, what inspires a person to decide to do a 500-mile journey and call up 73-year-old dad and say, Dad, I got a great idea for a father-daughter outing? Like, what was going in through your mind at the time?
Well, honestly, I first learned about it in 2010 when I watched the film The Way with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. And I thought,
Beautiful.
wow, what a great opportunity to get out there and do this amazing adventure. But it was something that I had tucked away for when I retired myself, which was a ways away at the time. And in 2017, when I took my dad to Europe, we were near the area of the Camino, and I told my dad all about it. And my dad at the time said, you know what? I'm too old for you to be talking to me about 500-mile pilgrimages. And so I dropped the subject and we never talked about it again. And we came home that summer and we hadn't even been home a week. And he says to me, I want to do the Camino. And at first I couldn't quite believe that it was his idea to go on the Camino. And it's pretty difficult.
Wow.
Yeah, it was his idea, not mine, because I had it slated for maybe 25 years later. And but my dad was 72 at the time, and I thought, well, I can't have him wait until I retire. And so I prepared for the next 9 months to do this trip with my dad. And by the time he was 73, we set off on the Camino de Santiago. And so it wasn't, it was definitely his idea. It wasn't something that I had planned to do in my early 40s, but I'm glad that I did.
But I have to tell you, I love these stories about women doing such incredible things in their 40s, 50s,
Mm-hmm.
60s, 80s, and beyond. There's just no stopping us, I have to tell you. What a beautiful story. But where was dad living at the time? And where were you? Like, how did you talk about it, connect? Tell me about it. And mom, too.
My parents only live 5 minutes away from me in Altadena. Mm-hmm. And I visit them, every weekend. And we just, he just, I don't know where it came out of his head to, I only had mentioned the Camino one time. He didn't seem too keen on the idea. And I guess maybe, I don't know if he talked to somebody else about it. I don't know if he saw it on a TV show. But next thing, he wanted to go. And that summer when he first mentioned it, I said, Dad, you do realize that if you want to go, we only have 9 months to plan. So I have to start planning right now. And so I did. And he's like, yeah, no, I get it. He's like, I want to do the Camino. And so we hadn't even been back a week from the other trip, which had taken me 6 months to plan. And the very next day I'm at Romans picking up, guidebooks on how to do the Camino de Santiago. So I spent the next 9 months researching and planning and buying the items that we were going to need to be prepared for this trip.
For those who don't know, please tell our audience, what is the Camino and what's the history behind it, please?
Absolutely. So the Camino is a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage that has been traditionally done from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, which is at the base of the Pyrenees Mountains. And so from the very beginning, you have to climb up a 5,000-foot mountain to get over. And then you walk 500 miles across northern Spain to reach the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. It's where it's believed that the remains of the Apostle St. James the Great are buried. And the apostle was, one of Jesus' 12 apostles. And he was beheaded. And when his remains were found, he was actually covered in scallop shells. And so this is the official symbol of anybody that's doing the Camino de Santiago. Any of the pilgrims or the hikers will have one of these on their backpack. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah. And so people go and do this 500-mile pilgrimage, either for health reasons, for personal reasons, so, trying to find themselves, or for religious purposes to go and, make a connection with this apostle, St. James the Great, in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela.
Now, you said you had to plan for it. Clearly, did you train for it? When you say plan, did you carry a backpack and tent every night? Did you stay in little pensions along the way? Like, what was the plan physically, mentally, and also in terms of logistics? Like, how did you do all that?
Well, that's actually an excellent question. At 40 years old, I was kind of at the height of my career, so I was busy. So, I was busy at a 40 an hour plus job every single week. And I had to make sure that my dad had the best possible experience on this trip. So in addition to, trying to do my job at work and plan and research and really get to know the route so that my dad could have the best possible experience, it actually left very little training time for me, which is definitely not recommended. My dad, on the other hand, had plenty of time to do a lot of the training that he needed, thank goodness. And yeah, he was doing 8 miles a weekend, hiking up, trails and things. So thankfully, he was able to train much better for it than I was. But unfortunately, I just didn't have that time.
Wow. But what about in terms of, where you were going to stay at night, and how long of a journey is this? Tell us.
So this is a 5-week journey. Obviously, some people might do it a little bit faster. Some people might do it a little bit slower, but 5 weeks is about the average. Most people will stay in albergues, which are hostels, and they cost between 5 and 15 euros a night, which is maybe $7 to $20 a night. And some of them have breakfast included. But you kind of have to rush to the best ones and make sure that you get one so you can have a place to stay for that evening. I didn't want that experience for my dad. I wanted to make sure that my dad had a nice, safe, clean place to sleep every night. So
Right.
I reserved small hotels and pensions for him all along the way. The only drawback from that was that we had to make it to the next pension every single night. We couldn't stop anywhere in between because, we would have lost our reservation.
I was just going to say that. Does everybody do this on foot, or can you do it by bike? I mean, is it always foot traffic? Because that would be hard, because what if you're just exhausted, you sprain your ankle, I don't know, something, and you need to sort of be wheeled to the next place. How does that work? That's almost a little stressful, right? To say you got to do this many miles a day.
Yeah, that's funny you ask that, because along the trail, you'll see signs that say taxi, because people will get hurt. And so people will take a taxi to the next stop. But you can take a bicycle, you can take a horse. So there are other modes of transportation. And some people do take a bus. So some people will go through the whole entire trail on a bus and do like the sightseeing tour of it instead of walking it. But if you want to earn a Compostela, which is a certificate, and that looks like this, then you actually have to walk it. And on the certificate, they will certify with, their signature and a stamp, all of the miles that you walk. But you have to, I don't have it with me, but there's a little passport that you have to stamp twice a day, every single day, in order to get the certification. And so in order to do it, so you have to, at least a very minimum, you have to do 100 kilometers. Either by foot or by horse. I think you can't do it on a bicycle. And a bicycle, you would have to do the whole entire thing in order to get the certification, I think. So
it's also kind of rough doing a bicycle, right, up the mountain and stuff. Or is it pretty well paved? Is it a dirt path? Like, what does it look like?
Oh, you have every kind of path.
I imagine.
You have every kind. Yeah. I mean, for the bikers, it's great when they have the road, but then again, if you're a walker, the road isn't that great because it's kind of hard on your knees. And so, but you have every kind of path. You have dirt paths, pebbles, mountains. If the weather isn't good, it's very muddy. So it's not the most ideal place to walk. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's a good idea to have the walking stick so that you can keep your balance.
Absolutely. You mentioned taxis, at different outposts. I remember when I did the New York City Marathon a few years back, And I was crossing over that last bridge. In fact, there was a sign and it said from the Bronx and it said last damn bridge. I thought, oh, please, God, let there be an Uber because I'll take it. And there's not, because along the way, cars can't get near you. But honestly, if there was, I part of me thinks I would have almost taken it, but I didn't because I wanted that damn medal. Like the way that you held up the piece of paper, I wanted my medal and I would have done anything to get that medal. So I'm like, just keep going.
Exactly.
And just when you're about to give up, you think about the medal, you think about the piece of paper, or you think about the reason behind why you did it, right? And you just sort of keep going, which I imagine for you was not just the pilgrimage, but a moment with your dad, right?
I did this for my dad. And it was all for him. And I had to finish it. I had to finish it for him. I was suffering a lot more physically than he was. Wow. And the last day we walked 23 miles on the last day, which is almost the equivalent of an entire marathon. So imagine walking almost 500 miles and the last day you do 23 miles. And so I was in a lot of discomfort, but I just had to do it for my dad. It was something that, he was really looking forward to. It was something that he wanted to do. And he was my motivation to finish it.
What were some of the lessons that you were learning in your own head as you're doing this? Because so much goes through your head. I just previously interviewed a woman who's also a friend of mine who sailed across the Atlantic twice.
Oh my gosh.
And the second time around in a small 30-foot boat.
Wow.
With one other person as a crew member. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what motivates you to continue to do it? And what are you thinking along the way? Because you clearly talk about, and you could see it in your poetry, some very high moments, but some pretty low ones too, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
I think one of the things, and I'm sure your friend probably feels the same way, is that you learn to appreciate the little things. I think in our modern society, we tend to fill our homes and our closets with all of these items. And then you go on a small boat or you go on this walk where you're carrying one little backpack and the entire contents of your survival are in this little tiny backpack. And you learn that you really don't need a lot in life, and you really don't to really get through life and to be content and to be happy. The things that are making you happy are the company that you're keeping, the new friends that you make, the beautiful world that you see in front of you. And I'm sure your friend definitely must have seen, hundreds of incredible sights as I did. And so you really learn to appreciate the little things in life, and minimalism becomes actually quite important in your life. I think that was one of the lessons that I learned. I also learned that it's not about the final destination, because I'm sure that your friend was thinking, oh yeah, well, I have to get to this final destination, but she was also enjoying the actual journey. And that was a very, very common theme along the Camino, that we were enjoying our time together. We were enjoying the actual walk, and we were enjoying the scenery. And oftentimes we always think about what's in the end, right? We're thinking about our retirement, where we're going to go when we retire, right? which was kind of what I had planned for my Camino, what we're going to do next summer. Right? We're not enjoying our life right now as it is. Are we right? We're not being mindful about our life, our current moment. Maybe even when you're having lunch with your friend, you're not thinking about your lunch with your friend. You're thinking about what do I have to do, for dinner or something, right? And I think that the other lesson that I learned was, like I said, it's not about it's not about the final destination. I think that you're always thinking about, oh, okay, I got to finish this 500 miles. It's all about that final, moment. And we made it to the final moment, and it was great, but we were actually almost depressed a little bit, because we're like, wow, we had so much fun doing those 500 miles. It was kind of a sad moment. Instead of being elated that we had finished these 500 miles, we were like, wow, it's over. And, we're not going to get to, wake up and do this every morning anymore. And so I think that's why so many people go back and continue doing it. I met people that had done it 14 times. They just continue.
Wow, that's extraordinary. You talk about very often we think about that final destination. Is that an American thing? Because I know my family in Italy is not quite like that. They're not. They live in a small village, beautifully, by the way. in a small town. And I know that your family is from Guatemala, correct?
Hmm. Exactly.
You know, is it like that there, that everybody's so goal oriented and they've got to do this by later and tomorrow? Or is it just an American thing? I'm wondering. What do you think?
I think it's such an American thing. I think it's,
Yeah.
when you go to Europe, you enjoy that meal and you enjoy the meal. I'm sure your lunches and your dinners are not 20 minutes in your car, right? You enjoy a
Horrible.
meal. Yeah. You enjoy a meal for 2 hours. You chat, and share stories. You really make a connection with the people that you're with. You relax, you enjoy the sunshine. And here we're in California, you don't see a single person out on their porch. I mean, everybody has a
That
porch.
that's
Yeah.
funny you said that, because my family, we had a little porch, and more like it, we would just put our little lawn chairs in the driveway, right? And being Italian, that's what they did. They were always out in the front of the house
Yeah.
and talking to the neighbors, whoever was coming by, invite somebody in.
Mhm.
And you're right, we don't really live like that. I'm sure I know there's some communities throughout the US that are like that, but for the most part, you're right. Everybody's in a rush to raise kids, and it's like, quick, get your dinner because you got to go to practice. And I used to think, even as I was raising my kids, why does he have to go to practice unless he really wants to go to practice? Do you know what I mean? And
Exactly.
people come here for what they say is a better opportunity, but is it really? When you stop and take that moment, you go those 500 miles or whatever you do, you learn so much about yourself. What did you learn about yourself? What did your dad learn about himself?
My dad, I think the most heartwarming lesson that my dad learned from this, because for years I had been trying to get him to go to Europe with me for years. And finally I managed to do it. And he says to me, he's like, now I know what you were talking about. And I am
Wow.
so, yeah. And he said, now I know what you were talking about. And I am so sad that I learned about it so late in life. Because in Europe, you take that time to live and to eat well and to enjoy your time and to really take it all in. And we don't do that here. You just work, 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 and do the same thing the next week. And so
Yeah.
it was really, almost a bittersweet comment that he made to me, because I'm glad that he did get a chance to learn about it. But, the fact that he said to me that, he was so sad that it was so late in his life that he learned it, because, in Europe, you do enjoy your life every single day, all the time. Right. And
Yeah.
so, I think the most valuable lesson for me was that I had a chance to get yanked out of my real life and get thrown into this for 5 weeks and say, hey, it was kind of a wake-up call. Like, don't just get so focused on your career that you forget about life. And so I've taken it all into perspective now. Yes, I'm focused on my career, but I will take time for myself now. Right. So
Yeah.
I do make time for myself and for my friends and for my family. It's not just about my job. And so it was a kind of a wake up moment for me. And I knew that, but I needed a reminder.
So every night you must have been quite exhausted after a long day of walking, some days I'm sure rainy and terrible weather. You made sure to write. Is that correct?
Absolutely. But I was actually writing along on the Camino. So I had a small
Oh,
pen and a
wow.
small notebook. And every time I thought about a sentence, I would stop, take out my pen and paper and start scribbling. So by the time I got to the hotel, I basically had the format of that sonnet finished, and I just had to do some corrections and then send it off into cyberspace. So for my friends and
Yeah.
family to read.
Oh,
Yeah,
beautiful. So you sent it for your friends and family to read.
I
And I
did.
know that while you were doing this, Mom went back to Guatemala, right, to see family. Is that true?
She did. She did it. And we were very comforted by the fact that she was going to have a wonderful time. And so we sent her to Guatemala a week before, and we were going to pick her up, a couple of weeks after. And, she was going to have some good quality time with her family. And we were going to go off on this 5-week hike. And coincidentally, the very first day that we set off on this hike, the volcano fire in Guatemala explodes. And my mother's family's house is right next to the volcano. Oh. And so we had just walked over the Pyrenees Mountains. We're literally in the middle of nowhere. we wake up to find out that this volcano had exploded, and we have no way of communicating back home to find out if she's okay. And so we didn't really know what to do.
Wow.
So, it was a very quiet, somber morning. I think my dad and I didn't talk that morning really. And I can honestly tell you, I think at least myself, I thought my mom was gone, and I think both of us were trying to be strong for each other, like don't panic kind of thing. And so we just grabbed our things and we started walking, because there was really nothing to do. It wasn't like we could get on an airplane. And even if we did, the airplanes in Guatemala and the airports in Guatemala were closed because of the ash. So it wasn't like we could get on a plane and get over there. And it took us at least half a day to find out that she was okay. So it was probably the most difficult day on the Camino to go through.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. That's scary. But then it also, look at the fragility of life. You can't plan anything. You just never really know where you're going to be, what's going to happen. And by the grace of God, she was okay. So thank goodness. Tell me some of the struggles physically along the way that you encountered. Did you get any snakes? I mean, what were some of the super scary moments? Did you fall down a cliff? I mean, tell us, because most of us are never going to do this trek, right? And this journey.
I think what the scariest day that I had on the Camino, it was, some days just felt really long. Like you just kept walking and walking, and the walk just never ended. And it just got to the point where I stopped looking at the map, because every time I did, we still had 5 more miles to go. So there was really no sense in looking at a map. And so one day, it was a beautiful day. It was one of those gorgeous days where everything was beautiful. We're walking, and we hit this forest. And I thought, well, the town must be at the end of the forest. So we go through all this forest, and by the time we get to the end, the rain clouds had actually come in. So the beautiful day turned really bad. And I looked, there's no town anywhere in sight. Instead, we were up at the top of a cliff looking down, and still at the bottom, you couldn't see a town. There's no town. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're never going to get off this thing. And what I noticed was, because like I said before, all of the terrain was different. And this particular terrain was made out of slate, and it was covered in a very thin layer of dry mud. And I thought, if that rain hits this mud, we're going to be slipping and sliding down the slope, right? And so I didn't say anything to my dad. And I thought, I got to get my dad off this mountain. And so I started walking faster and faster and faster. And I realized the faster we walked, the darker the clouds became. And still we were no closer to the town. And eventually my dad said, why are we running down this hill? And I finally told my dad, I said, look, if it starts to rain, we're going to slip off this thing. And my dad, didn't pay much attention to my theory, but he went along with it anyway. And so finally we hit the bottom of the base of the mountain where the town was. We're huffing and puffing. And just as we get down to the bottom, it starts pouring rain. And I was so relieved. And the very next day, we ran into a hiker that always walked slower than we did. And she said, oh my gosh, I was so worried for you guys. She said, did you make it okay? And I said, yeah, we made it down just in time. And she said, oh, thank goodness, because I slipped and fell on the mountain.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank God she was okay, though. And she was able to make it into town. Thank goodness. Oh my God. Exactly. Do you guys pack like tents if you need to immediately just, pitch a tent out there? I mean, you must have that, right? Because you never know. No?
No, you're not allowed to, camp on the side of the road, because most of the Camino is actually private property. So it's ranch after ranch after ranch. So you're not allowed to actually, stop and sleep. Some people did, they have their little sleeping bags, and some do have tents, but it's very, very rare that you see somebody do that. Very rare.
Wow. So you wrote every night, and you wrote poetry, which was really interesting. Did you always write poetry?
I played with it a lot, and I was introduced to it when I was a kid in elementary school. And I'm glad you asked that, because, when you're a kid and you read poetry, it rhymes and it's fun. And then the older you get, it's not as fun anymore, and it doesn't even rhyme anymore. Have you noticed that? You know,
I have, because see, I have, but go ahead. I know what you're going to say. I think. Go ahead.
Well, and I think it's a kind of, and I think people like poetry when they're a kid because it's kind of fun. And then I think it discourages people to read it when they get older because they don't feel as it's much fun and almost somber, at times. And so I wanted to make something that was fun and playful and something that rhymed that my friends would want to read.
Yeah, but poetry has such a rhythm to it, whether it rhymes or not, right?
It does.
It's the rhythm of the way it moves, right? The words move on the page. It really is. I learned that when I was in college, because I agree. If it's not roses are red,
Right.
it has a rhythm, and I just think it's so special. And I think a lot of people are afraid of poetry. They're afraid to write it.
I agree.
And they're afraid to read it because they're afraid they might not understand it.
Yes.
And the more you engage in it, the more it's actually quite special and beautiful. And these were outstanding. How many total poems are in this book?
39. And however, it should have been 40. There's one missing.
Oh.
And so truth be told, there was one night that I just had it. I was so tired and I was beyond my pain threshold, and I just didn't want to write anymore. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And so I stopped.
Yeah.
And a couple of my friends just coincidentally happened to write me that night. And they're like, Susana, we're really enjoying the poetry. We feel like we're on the Camino with you. We can't wait to read the next one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to keep writing. And they're the ones who kept me going, but I gave myself a break. I think I think it's very symbolic that there's a whole poem that's missing in the book, more so than if I would have written it. So there is one. If you look at all of the dates, there's one skip in there.
Well, you stay true to the moment, and you have to do that. You just have to stay true to the moment. Very authentic. Do you have a poem, a favorite in particular, that you would love to read to us? Because I think that our viewers and listeners, they would love to hear that. Would you?
I actually do have one. There's one where I talk about Ernest Hemingway, and I had just read a book that was written by one of his first wife. And what is the name? I think it's called The Paris Wife, right before I left on the Camino. And so I kind of had this, little connection with Ernest Hemingway because she talked a lot about the time that they were in Spain and the running of the bulls. And when you're going through the Camino, one of the places that you go through is through Pamplona, through where the running of the bulls is. And so I really got a kick out of, channeling Ernest Hemingway on the Camino de Santiago. And so that's one of my favorite poems. And so
which
number 8.
No, number 8. I was going to say which sonnet number, because you number them, which is nice, in conjunction to where you were at the time, which is because it gives us an idea of where your mind was at each day. So thank you for answering my question that I think you were going to say. So sonnet number 8, go ahead, please.
Yes. And it's called Sonnet number 8, On the Way to Pamplona. And this was from June 5th, 2018. We walked 11.8 miles that day. So the peaceful tranquility of our walk shattered by the bustle of modern life. We gather with new friends and make small talk about the region's political strife. We do as Hemingway and his friends did, but opt for coffee instead of red wine, and find pleasure in staying off the grid as we hear tales more engaging than mine. We run and dodge imaginary bulls, the unnerving feeling of facing death, the slight chance of being trampled by hooves, the warm, moist, forceful exhale of their breath. We leave our handkerchiefs and grab our poles to put more kilometers on our souls.
That is beautiful. Do the words just come to you? Are they inspired by what happened throughout the day, the people you met, your dad, all of it? Tell me.
All of the above, but when you're writing, one of the things that they tell you is, you have an audience. Who are you writing to, right? And so, and I was writing to my friends and family back home, and so if I were to read the entire book, I could write down the names of all of my friends who I thought about when I was writing each of the poems, because I had friends who liked Hollywood and they liked flowers and they liked nature. And so,
Oh.
and so anytime I saw anything or heard anything that I thought that they would enjoy, I would write about it so that they would enjoy the reading as well, so that they could follow along. Or food. So whatever it was, I have foodies, friends that are foodies. And so whatever it was that I would find along the Camino that I thought my friends back home would enjoy, that's what I would write about.
What would you tell to our audience, those people who are thinking of doing this or something similar, can't find the time, are afraid it won't work, not sure? What would you tell them?
I would say drop everything and go. Because one of the things that I was very concerned about was that I was going to quit my job to do this, because no boss is going to give you 5 weeks off, right?
Not in America.
In America, right? In America, we're not going to get 5 weeks off, right? And so I thought, you know what? I'm doing this for my dad. If I have to quit my job, I'll quit my job. And you're not going to believe this. It actually worked out. And so, I think we put our own barriers in our own head, and that keep us from doing things. But if we don't give it a try and actually do it, we'll never know. And so when you think that your boss is not going to give you 5 weeks to do this, if you have to quit your job, go for it. I mean, there are better opportunities. And I mean, who would have thought that I was going to have a book at the end of the day? This was not something that I had planned. I mean, I didn't go down the Camino and say, I'm going to write a book, right? This was completely not the idea. And so you never know what you're going to get out of it. You never know who you're going to meet. I mean, you might meet the love of your life on the Camino. You're going to have these wonderful experiences if you go and share it with your mom or your dad or your daughter or your son, on the Camino. And so or any journey that you go on, there are these priceless experiences, right? You can't even put a price on it. It's not really worth your job, right? So my advice is get up and go and do it and take an opportunity.
Any parting words you'd like to tell our audience? Because this is such a beautiful, extraordinary moment in your life. Is there a what's next for you, or what's next for you and Dad?
At the moment, my mom isn't doing too well, unfortunately. So I can't get up and go with him. But my dad doesn't want to do another Camino. There's actually 7 trails on the Camino de Santiago. No, there's not just one. And so I would like to maybe in the future go with my dad. If my dad says, let's go, I will drop everything and I will go with my dad and do the Camino again with him. A different route, of course. So yeah, it's just, spending time with your parents or with your loved ones, it's really something that you're never going to get back. I mean, when you're on your deathbed, I really doubt you're going to say, wow, I really wish I would have worked more hours, right? You say, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, with my friends. I wish I would have traveled more. Right? Those are the things that you wish for when you're on your deathbed. I haven't been there myself, but these are the kinds of things that you hear about, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Gosh, thank you so much for joining us. You're such an inspiring person. And, I love to, talk to women who feel, maybe they're stuck. There's a loved one that passed, their jobs or their family or kids or husband, and especially people in midlife, over 40, and it doesn't matter how old you are. Think about this, because time does sort of zoom by, and find something that you think would challenge you mentally and physically if you're able, and try, just as you said, try and find that moment to do it, because clearly no one I ever talked to regrets it ever. Whether they're sailing across the Atlantic or doing the Camino. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. And these poems illustrate this just beautifully. I just love your book. So
Thank you.
Oh yeah, to Compostela and Beyond. How can people find the book? How can they order it?
It is available on Amazon. And if you live in the city of Pasadena, it's at Vroman's Bookstore.
Okay, beautiful. And do you have a website you'd like to shout out to, and anything else?
Of course, absolutely. Thank you. You can find everything, all the information, and also my travel blog at susanaporras.com. That is SUSANAPORRAS.com.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so, so much for joining us.
It's a
Thank you for
pleasure.
sharing one of your poems with us and for
Thank you.
inspiring anybody out there who wants to do something similar. Do it. Reach out to Susana. I'm sure
Yeah,
that you
reach
answer
out to me,
everybody.
please. I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have. And there's also videos where I did presentations on the Camino itself with some specific information on my website as well. But please
Oh,
feel free to
wonderful.
reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, and I'm sure you are, because once you go through something like this, you want to just share that with other people. So thank you,
Exactly.
Susana.
My
Thanks so
pleasure.
much.
Wonderful speaking with you today.
Yeah, you've inspired me to do it. But after the marathons I've done, I think 500 miles might be a little tough for me. Maybe, but I don't know. Never say no, never, right? You just don't know.
Exactly. Never say never.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Anyway, everybody, thank you for joining us for this inspiring story with Susana. Please pick up the book, To Compostela and Beyond. It's a wonderful read. The poems are lovely. Each one is inspiring in a different way. And you can find our interview on all video and audio platforms whenever you get your podcasts. Just put in there Deborah Kobylt Live and you'll find us. We're also on YouTube. So thanks all of you for tuning in. Thank you, Susana. Hello to Dad and to Mom as well.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
yeah, reach out to us online as well. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.